So in this video, I wanted to discuss my review of the Beechcraft Baron after 300 hours of twin time. So my name is Ethan Boffman. I'm a commercial multi-engine land pilot and a FAA designated aviation medical examiner. My views do not represent the views of the Federal Aviation Administration. These are purely my opinions and, could be considered just for entertainment purposes only. So I wanted to discuss, my thoughts about a Beechcraft Baron and its suitability for, general aviation use. My experience, kind of a Part 91 operator of a Beechcraft Baron 55. So this is a 1973 Beechcraft Baron. It's a Bravo 55 model, and it was produced in Wichita, Kansas, in a factory. And I want to talk about the pluses and minuses of a Beechcraft Baron. So Beechcraft Baron is a light twin retractable aircraft, and it is, in this case, it's a normally aspirated, unpressurized airplane, meaning without supplemental oxygen, you're really limited to fly about 12,000 feet pressure altitude, and that limits the use of the airplane, to kind of non-alpine mountainous areas. So the Beechcraft Baron is a 6-seater. It is only equipped though for radio use for 4 individuals. So for whatever reason, Beechcraft put 6 seats in the airplane, but decided to only put radio communication systems in place for 4 radio headsets. So that means that if you take 6 people, the rear 2 occupants that sit in this area are not able to talk to the pilot and the co-pilot. And since this is an unpressurized aircraft and it's a twin engine airplane, it's going to be pretty loud. And so that is a problem. So really the only real use of the 5th and 6th seats would be for a small adult or mostly just children, as you can see. So these rear seats are pretty small and there's not a lot of leg room. However, when you climb up onto the airplane, it becomes apparent that for somebody who's elderly or has difficulty climbing up onto the wing of an airplane, this may be more difficult than a high wing airplane. So, that's a consideration that, you may want to think about, because, climbing into the seat here is not that easy for some occupants. And so that would be a disadvantage that you may want to think about. So when we're in the cockpit, you can see, this plane is equipped with a dual yoke, and we've got a kind of complex panel here. So you've got your traditional 6-pack over here on the left with the airspeed indicator, the altimeter, the attitude indicator, turn coordinator, and then we've got a Aspen primary flight display. So this plane has the Aspen connected to the Garmin 530 over here, and then we've got a second radio stack below that also has limited nav2 capability. And then we have the transponder, and then we have a backup G5 over here. So all the engine instruments were placed over on the right-hand side of the panel, which makes it a little bit difficult for the pilot to look over and see, but you can see it. And then sitting right on top of the yoke is the throttle quadrant. And so we've got, in the 1970s Baron, you have the the propeller on the left, and then the throttle in the middle, and then the mixture on the right. And that corresponds with a fuel pressure gauge that's right above the mixture, and the manifold pressure is right above the throttle, and the RPM is right above the propeller control. Now, one disadvantage of having a 50-year-old airplane is that you have cigarette lighters, you know, an old smelling cockpit. And when we first got this plane, you know, in April of 2022, the interior was original, and it had the original ashtrays. And one of the first things that we did was to refurbish all of the interior through an FAA designated repair shop. And so the headliner was replaced, and all of the door panels and interior panels, as well as the carpet, was redone, which that made a significant improvement in the kind of creature comfort of this aircraft and made it kind of look and feel more like a new airplane. Another thing that was done was, you can see here, this gas-powered spring was installed to replace the factory door post. So the nose baggage compartment, as you can see, up here can hold 300 pounds, and then in the rear baggage compartment behind the third and fourth seat, you can put 400 pounds. So this plane really excels at being a heavy hauling airplane with a useful load of 1,600 pounds. So with the two engines, you're able to safely travel up to, 5 hours carrying 1,600 pounds of people, persons, and baggage, which there are really not too many general aviation aircraft that can do that in this, piston retractable category. Now, certainly this plane sits below the turboprop class and pressurized kind of cabin class airplanes like a Cessna 340, a Pilatus PC-12 in terms of useful load and capability. But as far as the light twin category is concerned, the Baron does well, and it's fairly easy to understand why the Baron has maintained its appeal. There's not too many competitors to it. The other competitors in the class of the Baron would include the Piper Seminole, Piper Seneca, the Cessna 310, the Diamond DA-42, Diamond DA-62, and that would essentially be it. So in summary, what I would say is that after flying the Baron about 300 hours, I think it is a decent airplane in terms of cross-country, heavy lifting, long hauler, and you have no lavatory on board, no flight into known ice capability. You have quite a bit of redundancy in terms of the avionics and the ability to be able to fly with a co-pilot, and that is all great. What's limited is being able to fly into a short field or unimproved fields. It's really not set up for that. This is an airplane that you want to fly into bigger airports. You can't really fly into short fields at all. You can't really land on, dirt strips, things of that nature. You don't want to fly into a soft field. This plane is best suited for, hard surface, 3,000 foot or longer runways, and there's no points for flying slow in this plane because you've got the velocity of minimal control at 115 knots, and so you really shouldn't fly this plane any slower than 115 knots unless you're over the numbers. And so that's what really makes it so it doesn't excel at a short field. But it excels at a lot of other things, just as long as you use it and it fits your mission. It's not a bush plane by any means, and it's not really set up for commercial use or charter use. It's good for carrying maybe 4 people. It does that very well. 4 people plus luggage. It doesn't really do 6 people so well. And can it do it a short distance? Yes, but you can't have the tanks be full and you can't have a lot of baggage if you got 6 people. So as long as you play within those limitations, it does very well. So that's my kind of thoughts on the Baron. One advantage of this particular model, having the dual yokes and the dual rudder pedals down on the floor, is that it allows for a pilot and a co-pilot to essentially, both operate the airplane. And if you're on a long haul trip and you have a safety pilot or a co-pilot with you, they've got a set of backup instruments here on the right in the form of the Garmin G5, and the controls and everything is redundant, with the exception of the toe brakes are only on the left-hand side. So overall, I think the Baron is a decent general aviation heavy hauler for use, on cross countries, and it's not good for going into short strips or being a bush plane. It's good for carrying a lot of people and baggage a long distance, and it has the redundancy, of the 2 engines. You've got 2 alternators, you've got 4 magnetos, and so that helps a lot. If you lose an alternator, it's really kind of a non-issue, and that has happened to me, and we've just overhauled the alternator and went on. But if you're in a single airplane and you've got 1 alternator and you lose that 1 alternator, then you may need to land as soon as possible. And this gear is another factor that drives up insurance cost. So with the retractable gear, you can kind of see that with moving parts, things require maintenance, and if the gear doesn't come down, then it can essentially cost you the overhaul of the entire underbelly of the airplane, as well as 2 engines, because you're going to have 2 prop strikes. So that can be tremendously expensive for insurance companies. And because of that, the insurance on a light twin retractable airplane is significantly higher than many other categories. So if you're trying to save money on insurance, you can probably get a fixed gear, constant pitch airplane, and it'll be a lot less expensive than a twin retract. These are about as complex as it comes, so that should come into consideration. Now, once you get over 300 hours of twin retract time in type, your insurance costs will come down significantly, and that was what I saw. So, I'm giving this review having done the 300 hours and paid higher insurance premiums, and then the premiums finally come down after you get 300 hours in type, typically. But this airplane, being 50 years old, it's got about 3,500 hours. It is on its 3rd set of engines, and so the engines are around 500 and 900 hours each. The airframe, 3,500 hours. And in having gone through 2 annual inspections, what you can expect in terms of maintenance cost, the annual inspections are going to run anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 per year. And then there's going to be other miscellaneous costs that come up, like overhauling a magneto, overhauling an alternator, replacing tires, replacing batteries, and so forth. So this is the baggage compartment that holds 300 pounds, and this is the spring thing that kind of holds open the front baggage door. And so you know, the cost of acquisition is kind of fixed, but then the cost to maintain can be estimated to be roughly about $500 per hour, to, you know, including fuel, maintenance, inspections, and taxes, you know, other costs to consider. So, you know, overall, I think my review of the airplane is that it's a reliable, stable platform that, as long as you know the limitations of the airplane, like any airplane, you know, it can be safely utilized to go cross country, carrying a lot of people and baggage, and staying easily within the envelope of its performance. It performs very well. In terms of weather limitations and maneuver limitations, these planes do not excel in agility, recovery from spin. The capability, once all this weight is out here on the lateral aspects of the plane doesn't recover from spins well, because there's so much weight and fuel out here in the wings. And then it also doesn't perform well at extremely high altitudes because it's normally aspirated. You can see on the leading edges of the wings, there's no pneumatic boots. There's no, you know, bleed air that you would get from a turboprop or a jet engine. You essentially only have these hot propellers with alcohol that sprays on the propellers. And there's no hot plate here on the windshield. You essentially just have this rubbing alcohol that sprays on the windshield for anti-ice capability. So, you know, with those limitations in mind, the airplane really shouldn't be in known icing. You can encounter unknown icing and escape, but really with all the anti-icing alcohol spraying, you know, you're only going to have maybe 30 minutes at best to get out. So you need to change altitude, turn on all the pitot heat and the alcohol to get out of the icing, but it's not really a plane for going through known icing. So my plans for the future on this plane, having, you know, redone the interior and you know, just gone through 2 annual inspections, I'm kind of looking at doing some avionics upgrades here in the next year, and you know, deciding what kind of avionics upgrades make sense. That's a whole nother conversation. So, you know, what you invest in your avionics is probably not necessarily what you're going to get out of it in resale or you know, but it's a matter of safety, spatial awareness, redundancy, phasing out old instruments as the cost to maintain. You know, some of these instruments sort of, they get essentially totaled in terms of, you know, their ability and potential to maintain their function. So, you know, an altimeter, for example, that's 50 years old, you know, in a vacuum system that, you know, may stop working. You know, some people will take out the vacuum system and go to a totally electronic digital primary flight display. And, you know, if you can do that, then you don't have to maintain the vacuum system any longer. So with the Aspen system, their kind of appeal is that there's a modular primary flight display, and then there's a modular multifunctional display, and you can add those incrementally over time. Whereas, you know, Garmin, it's kind of like a whole revamp of the system, take out the entire panel and install a large, you know, LCD panel, like a Garmin 500 or 750 panel. And so, you know, and those are all considerations. And, you know, this plane is a factory produced certified airplane. And so everything that's done to it needs to go through a supplemental type certificate or STC certification process, which adds another layer of safety and cost. So for a manufacturer to put anything on this plane, they have to get the supplemental type certificate from the FAA issued. And so it's going to be more expensive than an experimental plane. And, you know, but that means it's gone through rigorous testing and there's standards, and you can feel sure that, you know, it's going to work with the airplane, and it shouldn't fail. If it does fail, then it's going to be either recalled and you're going to get a, you know, an AD for it, for repair, and your mechanic will look for all of those ADs for when the time comes to replace something. And times change. I mean, when you know, when unleaded fuel finally becomes an option for these airplanes, and we're no longer using, you know, 100 low lead, there will be STCs for the new engines that are able to burn the unleaded fuel. And, you know, who knows, maybe there will be electric engines in the future that, you know, and batteries. I mean, there's all sorts of things that may come, and people will adapt to keep some of these older planes flying. But a lot of things haven't changed in aviation for a long time, and that's why you've got planes that are 50 years old that are essentially very similar to, you know, the current planes that are rolling out of the factory. And you can buy a Beechcraft Baron that, you know, is built this year. The cost is obviously significantly higher, but for those people who can afford it and they want the new airplane with a new engine and everything, and that option is available. This plane also, it has a lot of the same functionality and the same useful load, and with a lower cost to acquire, obviously. So, but yeah, I think overall I'm happy with my my first 300 hours in a twin, and I would recommend a Baron 55. I would also recommend, you know, you look at the bigger engined Barons like the Delta 55 and the Echo 55, and look at Seminoles and look at Duchesses, look at other twins, DA42, 62, and see if it makes sense. The diesel burning twins like the Diamonds, those are an interesting option because they don't have magnetos. They're diesel engines that have an electronic ignition, and so if you lose electricity, then you don't have the benefits of a magneto. Whereas in this plane, you know, magnetos have been used for decades. You can turn off the master, or you can have no battery power at all, and the engines keep running until you pull back the mixture. So, you know, that's kind of comforting to know in a magneto-driven piston engine. So, but you know, leave comments in the on the video, and, you know, what else do you want to know about a Beechcraft Baron? I'm happy to tell you about it. But this is kind of my review of a Baron after 300 hours, and overall I'm fairly satisfied.